Hey guys, sorry for the wait, let's begin. Chapter 22, The Battle for Kumagakuer. Kakashi looked at the spot where the clone had been previous. This is not good. Rome agreed. Damn. I didn't suspect they would be that fast. Sasuke joined in. Having seen as well that the clone had disappeared. That or they have decided to move things forward a lot faster the moment Naruto got away. It was still so strange to talk about Naruto like that. The dead last who caught up to him and defeated him when he tried to betray the village. Sasuke had to suppress a scoff at the irony. Naruto betrayed the village himself shortly after they had returned to Konaha. No one heard of him for over 7 years and then suddenly he pops back up. Cocky and arrogant. Alright, we have to speed things up. Kakashi said. Breaking Sasuke's train of thought. Also, we will be entering our destination most likely while it's under heavy attack. So be prepared. Rome added as he shouted over his shoulder. Let's meet up with the detachments of the other village first. Mitra concluded, who had been silent for most of the trip. XXX. Hours later. Kumagakuer was on fire. Dozens of buildings were destroyed and countless bodies filled the streets. Naruto looked at the streets from his hiding spot. Night had come and nearly no fighting was going on in the streets. But by no means was the city conquered. Kumo had fallen back to their second wall, which they had constructed in hopes of gaining an advantage in case the Reavers actually managed to enter the city. And as of yet the defenders were still somewhat successfully holding off the invaders. Naruto was lying in the rubble. Using the rubble and a body nearby to mask himself as yet another fallen defender. From time to time a scream would erupt or a small explosion would occur, but nothing as extreme as what happened during the day. And that was a good thing. Every minute the enemy wasted on regrouping was a minute gained. He tuned back into the radio frequency that was given by one of the Kumo shinobi and softly whispered in the headset's microphone. Sector Alpha has minor activity, they are most likely regrouping for another assault. There was a moment of silence. All right. If you can. Try and regroup with the rest of us at the second wall. Will do. Darui, see you in a bit. The blonde turned off his radio again and slowly stood back up his feet. The dead body slid onto the ground and the hunter gave it a glance before moving out. He had to move, and fast. He had lost sight of Killer Bee hours ago and he assumed he had fallen back to the second wall. He could easily use Flash Step to get to his destination, but that would attract them all to the wall and he was afraid that would renew their fighting spirit. He slowly and as silently as possible made his way to the wall, which he could see in the distance. As he hugged close to a ruined wall of one of the buildings he could hear someone softly talking. PP please. I want to go home. Well, you ain't going nowhere. Now shut up you bitch and spread those legs, a voice snarled. Naruto looked at the defenses in the distance and at the two figures inside the ruined house. One was laying on the floor. A young woman with brown curled hair. Who from the looks of it had taken a severe beating. The other towered over her and was pulling down his pants. Naruto quickly grabbed a konaha and slipped inside the house. He silently made his way up to the man, and before the Reaver knew what happened, Naruto had placed a hand over his mouth and slit the man's throat with the konaha. Nighty night. He whispered and dropped the body to the floor. You alright? He asked at the young girl who couldn't be older than 16 or 17. She shakily stood up and rushed over, hugging him tightly. Thank you so much. Sir. I'll never forget this. Naruto, who stood rooted to the ground for a moment, smiled gently after he regained himself. Don't worry about it. Can you walk? We need to get to the wall. I think so. She hesitantly said as she slowly stood up, grimacing when she put some weight on one of her ankles. Naruto walked over and placed an arm around her waist and slowly helped her out of the ruined building. I can her voice was cut off when Naruto placed his free hand over her mouth and silenced her. He then pointed to the road in front of the building and saw a small group of Reavers scouting the place. We will have to wait this out. The blonde whispered, to which the girl responded with a nod. After having waited for 10 to 15 minutes, the scouting party finally moved on and they could resume their trek through the ruined part of the village. The fight had lasted for around 30 hours and they already had half of the village. The hunter doubted they could turn the tide even with the reinforcements that were incoming. He smirked and silently left the house and moved towards the wall. Yes. The odds were against them, but they were doing the impossible as well. They were hurting them badly. Every country they gained, they lost a high amount of manpower as well. And that was what kept a lot of them going. Naruto and the girl turned left and saw the large wall. There were barely any bodies. Who's there? Is it tha crazy haka and slasher who doesn't care? He heard someone badly rhyme. Yeah, it's me. And for the love of Kami, stop with that ridiculous rapping of yours. Naruto shouted, irritated. You hurt my feelings, but I don't care. The bad rapper sang. Naruto ignored him and walked through the small gate, who was quickly opened for them after they showed their proper identification. I assume you're Naruto, he heard a familiar voice say. He turned to his left and saw a dark-skinned man with white hair looking at him with a lazy look. Naruto nodded and walked over. He extended his hand, which Darui shook. I take it you're Darui. Sumimasen. Yes, I'm Darui. I lead the defenses, he said as he looked Naruto up and down. Where's the Raikage? Shouldn't he be leading the fight? He's preparing a surprise counter-attack that will hopefully hurt him badly. Naruto thought it over. It was a good idea, but the Reaver's massive amount of numbers would probably negate the attack. Darui knew it as well. The man may appear lazy, but he wasn't stupid. Naruto sat down and leaned against a wooden stand. The countless hours of fighting had really tired him out. I'm going to take a small nap, just punch me or something when there's trouble. Yo. Naru-Killer B started but was cut off when he got tackled by Darui. Sumimasen. But Naruto is already asleep. So be quiet. Mister? What's going on? He looked down at the boy with cold, calculated eyes. His hand slowly reaching for his kunai pouch. Stay away from my son. Please just let him leave. Let me take his place, a middle-aged man pleaded as he tried to crawl over. What you fail to understand is, he said as he grabbed one of the kunai, that no one leaves this village alive. With one quick motion he pierced the man's heart and quickly ended the young boy's life as well. No. You monster, the man screamed weakly as he slowly closed his eyes. His life fading fast. But not fast enough to avoid seeing his own son die. Ghost could only wince and watch the lifeless bodies. This isn't right, he whispered. Ghost. Are you finished with your part? Because I got some idiots who are actually trying to put up a fight and they are causing a distraction for the others to run away. Sir. Naruto slowly opened his eyes and saw the girl he saved earlier crouched in front of him. I never got your name, he asked while yawning. My name's Rei. You're Naruto, right? The brown-haired girl asked. Naruto nodded while he slowly stood up. I take it you're Ichinin? The blonde asked while he slowly started walking towards the gate. Yeah. For a month now, she answered as she followed him. If I were you, I'd make a run for it. Get out of the village while you still can. Rei stopped walking and looked at him with confusion. You want me to abandon my fellow shinobi? My friends. Naruto stopped as well and turned halfway. The village is done for. As well as every inhabitant in it. The enemy outside has a force 2 times the size your country had before the fight started. I'm not leaving. Even talking about this could be considered treason, she hissed while she looked at him with angry eyes. Naruto turned around and continued walking. Then you will die. Rei didn't listen and marched off. Naruto shook his head and was about to look for Darui when an explosion shook the earth. The blonde looked around and almost lost his footing when a second explosion took place. Breaks over, I guess. The hunter sprinted to the wall and was met with a handful of shinobi who were clustered together going over their battle plans. Naruto switched on his radio and tried to contact Darui. Darui? You there? There was a moment of silence before he heard Darui's strained voice. I'm here, we need help at the gate. They're trying to break through. Before Naruto could respond, a terrifying roar gripped his heart in fear. No. He whispered and looked to the sky. 2 dragons flew through the sky before landing on top of the wall. Letting out another roar before one let out a large stream of fire. Killing 2 junior shinobi. Naruto grabbed a handful of kunai with exploding tags attached and threw it at the massive beasts. The tags exploded, causing the dragons to fly off again. Darui. We need Killer B here. Naruto shouted in his mic while his eyes darted from the left to the right. Trying to find the beasts. Sumimasen. Killer B is with Lord Raikage and is unable to help, you will have to hold them off until reinforcements arrive. Before Naruto could even curse, one of the creatures dove to the ground and rammed him through a building. The blonde came to a skidding halt. Eyes wide and breathing heavily. What the? He tried to stand up but fell back down. The ground underneath him shook as one of the dragons landed in front of him. Refusing to give in to his fear, he tore his gaze away from the ground and looked in the eyes of the dragon. The dragon looked back and slightly tilted its massive head. Naruto spat out a mouthful of blood. If you think I'm finished, you really are one stupid beast. He then formed a couple of hand signs. Dash. Stop. Naruto looked at him with a shocked expression. Why? Was all the hunter asked. The beast rose back in its full height and spread its massive wings again, preparing to fly off. Come to Yuva Tower in 14 days. Before Naruto could respond, the dragon flew away, leaving him behind with far more questions than answers. Naruto. Konaha has arrived with reinforcements, but they have met heavy resistance. They're at the gates. How is the situation with the dragons? Solved, for the moment. I'll move to the gate. XXX. Rome shook his head. He looked up and saw Kanpeki approaching. Never before had he seen Kanpeki on a battlefield as this. Normally he'd have one of his off-tacticians lead the battle. He formed hand signs and then gripped his right wrist with his hand. Remember this one, big guy? Kanpeki narrowed his eyes in suspicion. With his free hand he aimed the palm of his hand towards Kanpeki. Tipura. He whispered. A small beam shot towards Kanpeki, who immediately remembered the attack. Kanpeki dodged the attack with a single flash step, only to be met with a jackhammer to the back of his head. Hitachi panted and coughed but straightened himself and looked at Rome, who nodded. He formed a couple of hand signs and then jumped back before shouting, Doton, Dori Udan. A dragon head appeared out of the ground and started shooting balls of mud at the Kanpeki, who was standing up again. Kanpeki in return created the Reaper's infamous wave and blasted it towards attack. Not only overpowering Hitachi's attack but also blasting the hunter away. Hitachi! Rome shouted and flickered away, trying to grab the now seemingly lifeless body of Hitachi. Kanpeki interfered and slammed his fist in Rome's face, causing the hunter to crash into the ground. Michiru, who had just finished of one of the lower-ranked reavers, turned to Sekiya, the brother of Hitachi, lying on the ground motionless, with a concerned Mayo looking over him. Shikamaru. Try and contact Kumo's headquarters again. We need them to flank them from behind. Suzuki shouted as he came sprinting past the Nara, who was standing close to the blonde female hunter. Already trying, he quickly replied, while trying to contact Kumo with his headset. Michiru looked around and saw shinobi fighting everywhere, from IWA survivors to Suna elite shinobi. Michiru. Send Hawk to us. We need his help right now. Rome's voice rang through Michiru's headset. Michiru widened her eyes. Rome never sounds this desperate. She quickly turned around and sprinted to where she last saw Hawk. Hawk, come in, she shouted in her headset while jumping over a fallen body. Hawk came skidding to a halt in front of her, blocking a holder's vicious attack. What's up? He asked rather calm. Michiru threw a kunai towards the holder, who tried to dodge, only to be stopped dead in his tracks by Hawk, who had grabbed his wrist. The holder could only roar in anger as he saw death approaching. Hawk watched as the body dropped to the ground. What's going on, Mitch? Rome needs your help, he's near the main gate. Hawk immediately turned serious. Let's go. Before they could turn, a body came crashing in. His face was almost unrecognizable due to the massive beating he had received. The man tried to desperately get back up but failed, and his head sagged back down to the ground. Michiru's eyes widened in fear when she saw it was Hitachi. She quickly kneeled next to him. Hitachi. Please say something. He won't be standing up anytime soon. Dear. A demonic voice boomed through the area. Michiru gasped and slowly tore her gaze away from Hitachi and looked at the person standing a few feet away. Kanpeki slowly approached her. Killing intent leaked out of his body. Why you? She stuttered. Kanpeki looked at her and gave her a cold smile. I expected more from hunters, he pointed to Hitachi. Worthless. Hawk dashed forward and tried to slam his fist in Kanpeki's face, only to hit nothing but air. I should have dealt with this problem myself from the very start, Kenpeka said as he appeared behind Michiru. His claw aimed at her exposed back. Chidori, a voice shouted. A bright light erupted, along with the sound of hundreds of birds chirping at once. Kenpeka, who had no other choice, used flash step to evade the attack, looked at the newcomer at his new spot with narrowed eyes. Interesting, but irrelevant. He disappeared again and appeared behind the man. Finally, Rome whispered as he finally got an opening in Kenpeka's defenses. He shined behind Kenpeka, who was about to kill the dark-haired man that was Suzuki. He unsheathed his katana and in one fluid movement made a deep gash on the reaver's back. He was about to follow up but was interrupted by Kenpeka's elbow. He quickly flickered away and spat out a mouthful of blood. Suzuki used the moment to turn around and delivered a sickening blow to Kenpeka's face, who stumbled backwards. He quickly followed up with a ninjutsu. Katon, Goryaka no Jutsu. A dragon made out of flames erupted and soared toward Kenpeka, was unable to dodge in time and got blasted away by it. Don't underestimate me, Suzuki said with a smirk, and was about to turn around when he got a response. And you shouldn't underestimate your opponent, Kenpeka said before appearing before Suzuki and blew him away with another wave of red chakra at point-blank range. Suzuki could only scream out in pain as he in turn soared out of sight. Rome dashed forward. His katana clutched in his hand, he quickly used a rock as support and jumped in midair, flipping over the dangerous reaver, trying to cut him in half while doing so. Kenpeka slowly leaned out of the way and dodged the attack. He quickly, in one fluid motion, grabbed Rome's wrist, broke it and then snatched the blade out of his hand, before kicking him away. Time for you to die, Rome. Kenpeka disappeared and appeared far behind Rome. His blade pointed towards Rome's back. Michiru, who had snapped out of her daze, quickly tried to grab Rome out of his flight but got blasted away by one of Kenpeka's attacks and could only watch in fear as Rome got pierced by his own blade. No, she screamed as she desperately tried to get back up. Kenpeka grabbed Rome by the throat and pulled him in the air. You were a respected opponent, Rome Hiwa, but to all things must come an end. And for you that time has finally come. Why you? Rome spat out a mouthful of blood. As someone will end why your existence. He clapped his hands together. Futon, Repusho, the attack blew the both of them away from each other. Rome landed in front of Michiru. One of his hand twitched every so often. Michiru crawled to him. She couldn't see Kenpeka anywhere. While she tried to get to Rome, she also opened all friendly radio frequencies. Anyone else listening in? This is Michiru-san calling in for immediate reinforcements. All she received was static. Rain slowly started pouring down, making the battlefield all the more horrifying and realistic. Michiru ignored it and instead tried to contact someone again. Is there anyone on these frequencies? Again she received no answer. Please, she whispered as tears streaked her face. She looked down at Rome, who looked at her with one eye barely open. Everyone is too busy fighting. Darling. As if to prove his point, Kenpeka pointed to Hawk, who was desperately trying to defeat his new foe. Casting a fearful glance towards Michiru, Michiru swallowed in fear and cradled Rome's body. Gee, go away. Where was her mom when she needed her the most? Two IWA survivors appeared, trying to catch the reaver by surprise, only to be killed seconds later. Kenpeka, who had grabbed his own sword, prepared the killing blow. A cold smile crossed his scarred face. Michiru looked up. In his eyes, and what she saw was pure and utter horror. Today you finally get to die. You've been an annoyance for too long. Rome. Kenpeka barely even acknowledged Michiru as a threat, and was about to cut the two of them in half when suddenly a sharp whistle halted Kenpeka's final blow, and he looked up towards where the noise came from. A couple of feet away stood a young man with blonde spiky hair dressed in a hunter's outfit. He walked over, relaxed, with his katana in its sheath lying over his right shoulder, while having it loosely grasped. Don't interfere if you want to live a little while longer. Naruto chuckled. I think you'll want to face me instead of Rome. He glanced around him. The battle for Kumo was in full swing. They were fighting on the walls and in the streets while the wounded desperately tried to head for safety. Kenpeka looked at him with narrowed eyes, and that was all Naruto needed. He disappeared with a flash step and grabbed Rome and Michiru from the floor before disappearing with another flash step. When they arrived at their destination, he softly laid them on the ground at Konoha's rally point. "It's time for you to head home. I'll make sure you guys can escape," Naruto said with a small smile. "You can't be serious. You won't stand a chance," Michiru whispered. She grabbed his hand, refusing to let him go. "He's not going to stop until his heartbeat stops." He stood back up and turned around to Kanpeki, who had followed them. "Rome is mine. Leave now so that you may live for another couple of days. You know. Remember your son? Kane, was it?" "Yeah. I killed him. So who do you want to take down, some bald guy who only halted your previous invasion? Or me?" he pointed to himself. "The guy who killed your offspring." Kanpeka's eyes darted from Rome to Naruto before giving him a single nod. "So be it." Naruto looked down at his hand and focused on his demonic chakra. Dark red swirls appeared around his claw-encased hand. Then slowly a dark glow appeared and his hand changed into that of a demon. "Bring it on." He motioned with his claw. The Reaver and the Hunter disappeared and reappeared on top of the mostly destroyed wall. Kanpeka blocked Naruto's attack while the latter already formed a Raise-Non in his hand and aimed it at the Reaver's head. Kanpeka twirled around the attack and aimed for Naruto's exposed back, only to have it blocked by the back of Naruto's claw, giving Kanpeka not a second to counter. Naruto kneed his opponent in the stomach and was about to use that momentum to cleave the Reaver in half, only to scream in pain as Kanpeka made a wild but accurate slash with his own claw, making a deep gash across Naruto's chest. He tried to ignore the pain and continued to exchange blows with Kanpeka, who was showing only a minor form of exhaustion due to having fought multiple opponents the whole time. Kanpeka tried a high kick, only for Naruto to grab the limb and with some effort threw the leader of the Reavers to the other side of the wall. He quickly grabbed his katana from the ground and jumped after him, hoping to pierce the man's body while he was in mid-flight. He slammed the tip of the blade down and for once he knew he could strike a serious blow. Kanpeka saw the attack coming but couldn't twist his in time, so he instead grabbed the incoming blade with his claw and limited the damage to the point that only the tip of the blade pierced his chest. Naruto cursed and now knew he was open to a counter-attack as well. He wasn't disappointed. His still outstretched arm got grabbed and got thrown away. Down the wall. Naruto flipped and landed on his feet, but Kanpeka gave him no time to catch his breath and slammed his fist in Naruto's jaw, causing the blonde to be slammed in the wall. Naruto slowly looked up and saw a couple of throwing knives coming his way and quickly jumped out the way. He managed to get his footing and formed a couple of hand signs. Fudo dash, but before he could finish his jutsu he was cut off by Kanapchi, who had landed right in front of him and jackhammered him into the ground. Kuso. Naruto cursed and used Flash Step to catch his breath. He had various cuts across his face and blood seeped out of it and down his face. His clothing was already damaged at multiple places and started to expose his upper body. Naruto looked to where Michiru and Rome were and saw with relief that they were long gone. He slowly grabbed his katana from the ground and looked at his slowly approaching opponent. Naruto sighed and looked Kanpeka straight in his eyes. "What are you waiting for, big guy?" Kanpeka tilted his head, he increased his killer intent and slowly step by step approached Naruto. It was like he was looking at the Shinigami itself. Naruto gasped. "You made a deal with the Shinigami, didn't you?" finally coming to the realization that Kanpeka could have somehow contacted the Shinigami. That would explain how he got a demon and the eyes of death itself. The Yondaime and Sandaime did something similar but summoned the Shinigami in a sick and twisted way. Kanpeka could have done something along those lines as well. Kanpeka said nothing and dashed forward. He slammed his blade into Naruto's, and before the hunter could even comprehend what happened next, Kanpeka had already gashed open the right side of Naruto's face with his demonic claw. Naruto fell to his knees, clutching the right side of his face. His demonic chakra dissipated. "Retribution," was all Kanpeka said as he grabbed the hunter by his throat and pulled him in the air. The heavy rain hit him in the face and all he could do was gaze in Kanpeka's eyes, not even having the energy to move his arms. Kanpeka let out a massive amount of killer intent before he blasted the blonde hunter away with his red chakra. Naruto flew through the air, everything was nothing but a daze to him. He landed lifeless onto the ground, not having the energy to get back up. His mouth was filled with blood and slowly oozed down his chin. He tried to look around but only was able to see with his left eye. Slowly with a shaking hand he reached for his right side of his face but collapsed his hand when he felt a sharp sting of pain around his face. "Looky here. A hunter. And it seems he's still alive," Naruto heard someone say, and before he knew what happened he was kicked away and rolled on his side. "Kill him already. Would ya? The village is destroyed. They're reinforcements as well. I want to head back to the camp and get me a nice lady." Naruto knew that no one would save him, so he placed his hands on the ground. CC Chakra, PP push. He instantly got blasted away and into an alley which was mostly filled with debris. With almost no chakra left and the loss of a lot of blood, he slipped into unconsciousness. Triple X. Michiru and the others came to a halt close to the border of Shimono-kuni. Here they had set up encampments and were treating the wounded. Michiru was aimlessly walking through the camp and her only thought on her mind was how she had left Naruto behind. Kumo had fallen, the Raikage and his supposed counter-attack also had failed utterly and probably lost most of his men. Konaha had sent a lot of men along with IWA survivors and Suna shinobi. But they were still outnumbered and they quickly came to the conclusion that if they kept sending men to lost causes it would severely hurt them in the end. A decision to retreat was made quickly. Leaving behind Kumigakure. Michiru, the attractive blonde, looked up and saw Hawk approaching. She gave him a nod as acknowledgement but didn't respond in any other way. "I know you feel bad, but Naruto made his decision." He laid a hand on her shoulder and looked in her eyes. "He'll make it. We still have the Akatsuki harassing them, so don't worry. We lost Hitachi and Kia is in a coma. Rome won't be lasting the night and Naruto is probably dead," she cried hysterically. "Don't you dare to tell me I shouldn't worry." She slapped his hand away and marched off. Mayu sadly looked at Rome, who was barely breathing. She had tried everything she could but his lungs were punctured and he had massive internal bleeding. He most likely wasn't going to make it, and that broke her heart in two. She heard footsteps approaching and looked up. She saw Michiru standing in the opening of the tent with a tear-stained face. "I'm going back," her daughter said resolutely. "Like hell you are." Mayu hissed and stood up. "We already lost too much. I refuse to let you go. It's not up for debate." "Mom. Stop treating me like your daughter and start treating me like a hunter." She was about to respond, saying she never treated her like that. And though she was her daughter, she was also a hunter and treated her like she treated everyone else. But she couldn't. Because she did treat her like her daughter most of the time. "It's not that. Going back is suicide. Even if you weren't my daughter, then I'd still not let you go because back there is nothing. Naruto could still be alive." Michiru shouted with a furious look on her face. "If he is, he'll use Flash Step to meet up with us. Now this discussion is over," Mayu said with finality in her voice. Ending the conversation. The young blonde hunter wanted to continue but decided against it and marched out. Triple X. Naruto slowly regained consciousness and the first thing he noticed that although he was freezing because of the rain, the wound on his chest and face were throbbing, causing agonizing pain. He could barely move and couldn't help but feel utterly helpless. He tried anyways. He slowly, with the help of the wall next to him, got to his feet, only to collapse seconds later. "Who's there?" he heard a female voice say with a slight quivering voice. Naruto looked around with his impaired sight but didn't see anyone. Where are you?" he whispered with a hoarse voice. He heard someone crawling to him and a soft gasp. "Naruto," he heard someone whisper. He looked around but couldn't see anyone. He reached out with his hand and felt someone grasp it. Who are you?" he whispered again before coughing up a lot of blood. He closed his eyes and wanted to slip into the darkness again, but someone didn't let him. He felt his head being lifted in the air before softly being placed on something comfortable and warm. With a lot of effort he opened his eyelids. He still couldn't see from his right eye, but what he saw made him smile. Hey. Hinata," he said, and realized he was resting on her lap. "Naruto-kun. What happened to your right eye?" she whispered and gently touched his face, causing him to wince. He felt himself slowly slipping away again, but he tried to respond nonetheless. "I take it there's something wrong with it?" Hinata looked away for a moment before she gave him a sad look. It's gone." Naruto didn't respond and instead welcomed the darkness. Kuso. Chapter 23, Sneaking Around. Baka Yaro. Kono Yaro. B shouted and pierced two reavers with his two blades simultaneously. He turned and with a weird form of elegance danced around the battlefield, killing numerous lower-ranked reavers. You are really something else. Killer B stopped and tilted his head slightly. He pointed to the newly arrived holder and grinned. Yo, you have a strange voice. I doubt that was your choice, Yano. Killer B rapped badly before writing it down in his small book. The holder, who was done with B's ridiculous rhymes, charged forward. Fist pumped back, ready to give the Jinchuriki the beating of a lifetime. I'm the Eight Tails. I sting like a bee. The rapper charged forward and tried to ram one of his blades in the holder's eye socket. The reaver dodged it in time and tried to catch Killer B in the counter, but had to sidestep the second blade. You forget the most important thing. Baka Yaro. Kono Yaro. And that is, I'm the Eight Tails with some special tools. B mentally shook his head for the bad conclusion of his rhyme. A tentacle erupted from his back and slammed the holder away, but before the reaver could actually start its flight, he was grabbed by one of his legs and was swung around like a puppet before being rammed in the ground. B's blade already piercing the man's chest. No one messes with the Eight Tails. He shouted before charging off again. XXX. Killer B had lost all sense of humor the moment he saw how bad the situation actually was. He used 5 of his tentacles and slammed around, sending reavers flying. He knew that Kumo was already as good as fallen, but that didn't stop Kumo from fighting to the very last man. Rantan, Rizasakasu, several thin beams shot forward, hitting several reavers and blasting them away. He swiped the sweat of his forehead before grabbing his blade from the ground and dashed forward. This is a drab situation, Darui thought to himself. The Raikage had gone and tried for a massive counter-attack. And at first it seemed that it was going well. The reavers were completely taken by surprise and had taken a lot of casualties. A lot of the deaths were caused by the Raikage, who could almost match the speed of their flash step, and that had caused even more confusion. However, eventually the reavers regrouped and used their sheer numbers to overwhelm the Raikage's assault force, killing a lot of them. The fighting, which had at first dimmed down in the city due to the counter-attack, was now again in full swing, and people were literally fighting anywhere, from one of the squares in the city to small ruined buildings and even small alleyways where there was almost no room for maneuverability. Although the morale was low, the Raikage had managed to boost their fighting spirit earlier. Flashback. Couple of hours ago, Darui and Killer B, along with B's old students, were fighting on the market square of Kumagakuer. The second wall had fallen, and it seemed that there was absolutely no chance in hell they were going to survive this. A high-pitched sound filled the air before they heard someone roar through several speakers. To all remaining shinobi in Kumagakuer, this is the Raikage speaking. I know the fight is going badly, and even though we took a lot of them down, there are still too many of them left. A's voice boomed through the area. But we can't give up. We have to keep fighting to protect the civilians. Show to me that you are true shinobi. Retreat is not an option. Fight to your dying breath. What caught them by surprise the most was when suddenly music filled the air. It was Killer B's rapping. The mass of Kumo shinobi shouted in agreement and cheered before charging forward with new resolve, getting the reavers by surprise. End flashback. XXX. Evening after the Battle of Kumagakuer. Naruto leaned against the wall, panting heavily. Hinata had gone ahead to check if it was all clear to cross a small road. He looked down and saw a small mirror lying on the ground. With a grunt he reached for it and held it in front of his face, and what he saw confirmed what Hinata already told him. His right eye was gone. A large gash crossed his eye and down his cheekbone. Blood kept seeping out of his socket. He suppressed a groan and slowly tried to close his right eyelid, which caused a lot of pain. Fuck it, he whispered. He slowly tried to stand up but was quickly stopped by Hinata. Would you stop that? She swung his arm around her neck and slowly dragged him across the small street. I haven't seen a single person yet. Which is strange. I would have expected them to strip the town of all its resources. Naruto didn't respond and just kept glancing from the left to the right. They continued sneaking through the mostly destroyed city, stopping every so often thinking they heard something. We have to keep going. Naruto, how are you holding up? The Hyuga asked, giving him worrying look. They had stopped for a moment in one of the many alleys. Naruto wanted to respond saying he was fine, but he just couldn't. Exhaustion and the pain, accompanied with the loss of blood, he just was unable to talk. Instead he gave a weak smile. Before Hinata could respond they could hear voices. It's ridiculous we're giving this to some fucking shinobi just because their leader are helping us out, I mean. He should feel lucky he's still alive, they heard someone say. Yeah well. Fuck it. Doesn't matter anyways. We'll be regrouping and shit here for a while anyways. They really did defend this place to the last man. Someone else said with a chuckle. Naruto felt his legs slowly giving into the exhaustion and slowly slipped out of Hinata's grasp. They were going to die and that was the end of it. Kenpei was going to win and they had lost. This was it. Naruto, she whispered as she saw him sag to the ground. Naruto. You have to stop. You need to calm down. You're hyperventilating. Naruto took deep steady breaths. His vision became darker and his head rolled from the left to the right. Hinata, you need to get out of here. He said, taking ragged breaths. Stop talking nonsense. We're both going home, she hissed while she looked around the corner. The Reavers had left. He coughed up another mouthful of blood. Look at me, I'm a mess. I'll only slow you down. Get the hell out of here now. What have we here? A sound echoed through the alley. Naruto saw Hinata's eyes widen in fear and slowly turned around. You want me? Naruto said between gritted teeth. Naruto, shut up. Please. What are you talking about? The holder asked. Looking at the wounded hunter. You know I'm a hunter. Hunter goes to be more specific. I killed Kenpei's son. Naruto said as he slowly pushed himself on his feet. Almost falling face first in the ground. Why you think your leader wants his son's K-killer dead? Hinata looked at him with pleading eyes. She already knew what he was planning. He was going to sacrifice himself in the hopes of getting her out alive. The holder looked at him with narrowed eyes. What are you aiming at? Hunter. Naruto reached for a konaha and held it at his own throat. If you let the girl go I'll come with you. But if you don't I'll kill myself right here and Kenpei won't get his vengeance. The holder opened his mouth to respond. But instead of words, blood trickled out his mouth. Before Hinata or Naruto could even look at one another the holder dropped to the ground. Behind the holder stood Itachi, holding a bloodied konaha. You aren't looking too good, Naruto-kun. Naruto tried to smirk but instead grimaced. Don't want to talk about it? Itachi walked over and crouched in front of the blonde. Kenpei did a number on you. Itachi glanced over his shoulder. It would only be a matter of time before they would start to wonder why the holder hadn't checked in yet. Can you walk? Naruto was completely drained. The fight had not only beaten him physically but emotionally as well. He shook his head. Itachi narrowed his eyes slightly. Yes you can. Naruto just shook his head again. Blood dripped on his ruined outfit. Itachi grabbed him by the chin and forced the blonde to look at him. Naruto in return avoided his gaze. He's out of it, Itachi sighed and stood up. We can't stay here. They will find out soon, Hinata softly said as she looked at Naruto who was barely even paying attention. Itachi nodded and grabbed Naruto by the wrist and started carrying him. XXX. Kakashi looked at Neji with a concerned look. When Neji heard about Hinata he immediately tried to mount a rescue operation. His request got denied. Shikamaru had ultimately decided that retreat was the best option. And that a counterattack or infiltration would be suicidal. Sasuke had relayed the message to everyone. He also got the brunt of Neji's rage. I don't care about Shikamaru's orders. I'm going back there with or without your help. Neji, you aren't thinking straight. Your feelings are clouding your judgment. Sasuke tried to reason. Neji narrowed his eyes in anger. Like you're one to say, he spat. You went running off because of it? Sasuke opened his mouth to respond but he found he couldn't. Instead he turned away for a moment. Neji was right, he had no right to say something. But that didn't mean he was going to let him go. Kakashi knew Sasuke could handle it, so he grabbed his orange book and pretended to start reading while his thoughts drifted off. Flashback. 4 months and 8 days after Naruto's betrayal. Kakashi dashed through the forest. Tsunade had informed them that Naruto was seen by one of her informants. saying that a fight had taken place there. Kakashi glanced over his shoulder to see if Sakura and the others were still able to keep up. Sakura had a sad and doubtful look on her face. Apparently she hadn't forgotten what she had said to Naruto. Beside her, all of the rookies were assigned on this task. Except for Sasuke, who had still been under close guard of one of the Umbu. Along with the rookies, all their senseis were tagging along as well. They didn't know what to expect from the blonde and had to take precautions. Just in case. "We're approaching the bridge," Kurane pointed out as she nodded towards the bridge, which was slowly becoming visibly as the forest finally cleared. Kakashi gave a single nod. "All right. Don't attack him. Just leave it to us. You're only here to try and talk him into getting back." "Understood." He received several highs, and with that he turned his attention back in front of him. After a couple of minutes they arrived at the other side of the bridge, and what they noticed were the body bags lying next to the bridge. "What happened here?" Chuji asked as he looked at the body bags. "It must have something to do with the fight that was mentioned," Asuma pointed out, while he took a drag from his cigarette. "And you would be correct," a voice said. They all turned their attention to the newcomer, who turned out to be a middle-aged man with a hat. "What exactly happened here?" Kurane said as she butted in, grabbing Asuma's cigarette and threw it on the ground, getting a grunt from the chain smoker as a response. It was just like any other day. People doing their groceries, he sighed and scratched the back of his neck. That was until two random guys showed up and started killing everyone. Unknown what they exactly wanted. "What happened then?" Sakura asked. She had taken a real liking towards the small town after their assignment they had here. The man started smiling. A random shinobi just popped up and defeated them. He knew that they were Konaha shinobi. He wasn't dumb. Naruto had saved their village twice now. And he was going to repay him by keeping them off his tracks. A random shinobi? What did he look like? The man seemed to think about that for a moment. "I guess average height. Brown hair. Kinda spiky though." The rookies seemed disappointed, but Kakashi looked at him with a calculated eye. Apparently thinking things over, it could be Henge. Asuma and Kurane nodded in agreement. Shikamaru looked lazily at Ino. "Could you?" he asked. Ino nodded with a small smirk and used her signature jutsu to enter the man's mind. "Ma." "Shikamaru. Say if you're going to do that next time," Kakashi said, feigning annoyance. Moments later Ino woke up again and gave cocky smile. "Naruto was here. The man's been lying to get us off his trail." Kakashi tilted his head. "Not very nice." "Now, why would you do that?" The man sneered, but said nothing. "That's because Naruto asked them to help keep his stay here a secret." And they all agreed. Ino answered for the man. "You little brat," the man shouted. "What did you do to me?" A small tick appeared on her forehead. "Who are you calling a brat? You disgusting pervert. You're having very disgusting thoughts about Kurane-sensei." The man's face turned bright red and marched off, muttering about freaks and mind readers. Asuma's left eye twitched and was about to run after the man, but decided against it when Kurane shook her head. "What's our next plan of action?" Shino silently asked. "We should check out with Tajuna. Whoever that is, I saw that name floating around a lot." Ino mused. Tajuna was the man we were supposed to protect on our first mission out of Konaha. It was a C-ranked mission turned to rank. It makes sense Naruto would have gone to them. They were really nice to us. Sakura exclaimed and was already making her way to the house. XXX. While they were on their way to Tajuna's house, Kakashi had summoned his Ninken and started trying to find his scent. "There it is!" Sakura shouted and ran over, knocking on the door. When she got there, the door opened, revealing an attractive woman, better known as Tsunami. Immediately after noticing who were standing at the door, she scowled. "Tajuna, they're here." They could hear some noise in the background, and moments later an older man appeared in front of them. "Tajuna. It's good to see you again," Kakashi said with a smile. Tajuna glared at the man. "I don't have anything to say to you. Why don't you get the hell away from here?" Kakashi widened his eyes slightly. "I guess you've heard." "Of course we heard." He told us and we gave him a place to stay here and he accepted. Where is he now? Asuma asked, looking at Kakashi from the corner of his eyes. I don't know. And even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you, disgusting bunch. Now get the hell out of here. Wait. We have to check your house, Kurane said before turning to the rookies. Hinata. Hinata gave a resolute nod. Byakugan. With her Keki I Genkai she quickly checked the house but found nothing. She sadly shook her head. How long has he been gone? Kakashi asked, not caring that the older man was on the edge of exploding. Go to hell. I can't believe you actually betrayed your own student. Tajuna spat before slamming the door in their faces. The silver-haired Jounin looked to the ground for a moment. Lost in thought for a moment. What now? Scout the area. Shikamaru asked. Kakashi shook his head. My summons would have found his scent by now. It either means he's been gone for days or the rain has washed it away. Damn it, Naruto. You've really done it this time. I'm sorry, sensei. Kurane looked at him with a slight confused look. You mean we're going back already? Kakashi looked up in the air. We'll stay here for a short time. Everyone, take a look around the village and report back at the bridge in 2 hours. Everyone split up in small groups. Kurane going with her students while Asuma went to get some cigarettes. Kakashi, who was lost in thoughts, continued to wander around. I had a moment of weakness and that may have cost me more than I can handle. I never actually considered trading him for another student. It doesn't matter. Naruto left because of the chakra seal and not of my wrongdoings. He noticed he had stumbled upon Zabuza and Haku's grave. What he noticed was that the flowers that were placed upon their graves were relatively fresh. He reached and grabbed the flowers, which were wet from the rain from earlier. No one would actually visit their graves, would they? Perhaps Tajuna and his family would have, but the village? No, Naruto did this. He looked back up and suddenly noticed a small picture. He grabbed it and what he saw made him smile. It was the picture of their old team. He turned it over and something scribbled on the back. It's weird to miss someone who was out to kill you. Thank you for everything. Zabuza. Haku. You taught me what it means to be a shinobi. Naruto. Kakashi laid the picture back down. He stood back up and decided to get a bouquet of flowers as well, but was interrupted by Pakun, who had landed on the ground behind him. You found anything? The dog nodded. It's very faint. But I've detected Naruto's scent around 15 miles from here across the bridge. That's why it took so long. Kakashi crouched down and scratched the dog. So we found him. He couldn't help but flash back to his days in Umbu, where he had the task from watching over little Naruto from time to time. The beatings and hatred he received was sickening. And how the blonde kid had survived those years were still beyond him. Kakashi tilted his head. Now that he thought about it, the blonde genin never seemed to have much luck at all. The hatred never stopped. Only the beating. And that had been replaced by ruining his apartment. They only did that because he could now fight back instead of lie down and accept it. The Jounin sighed. Even after all that, he still tried to earn the respect of the villagers. But then the council was out to get him. Without the support of the Hokage. Chakra seal. He whispered. Earning him a confusing look from the Ninken. Everyone abandoned you. I can understand now why you left. Uzumaki Naruto. Kakashi stood back up. You want me to gather the others? Pakun asked. Kakashi shook his head. No, you can go home and rest. You've done enough. You need my help if you want to catch up to the kid. You know that. The dog answered. Walking around the silver-haired Jounin in circles. We're not going after him. We're going back home. Kakashi said as he walked back to the village. I see, well. I guess my work here is done. Kakashi glanced towards the dog. Thanks for the help. Can you scratch my ear? No. Okay, take care. And with that the dog dispelled. You earned a break. Naruto. But I do hope you know what you're doing. Kakashi muttered. Chapter 24, The New Cyclops. Naruto regained consciousness long enough to notice they had escaped the village and were making their way through an area filled with hills and rocks. A desolate place. Where are we? He muttered. We're almost at the rendezvous point. Hinata answered, who was walking to his right. Naruto glanced down toward his chest and noticed that they had bandaged his wound. We did what we could to slow the bleeding, but we're no medics, Itaka said when he saw that Naruto was looking at the gash. Naruto wanted to nod but decided against it, knowing it would increase his already throbbing head. Itaka, he began. The name he spoke came out in a slur. Itaka looked at him with curious eyes. What's wrong? I lost the K-katana you gave me, Naruto whispered, unable to look Itaka in the eyes. Itaka gave a small smile. What are you talking about? Hinata has it. Naruto slowly looked to Hinata, who was supporting him as well. You were grasping it so tightly when I saw you in Kumo. I thought you'd never let it go. As to emphasize her point, she held out her other hand, which held the katana wrapped in clothing. Naruto gave a nod of thanks before he focused his gaze to his front. He could see faint lights in the distance. So, does this mean you will give us a chance again? Hinata hopefully asked while a small smile slowly formed on her face. No. Naruto began, causing Hinata's smile to drop. I'm willing to give you a chance. She shook her head and smiled. I guess it's a start. Before you know it, you'll be having laughs with everyone from the group again. Itaka snorted while Naruto coughed. Now you're being ridiculous. Hinata. XXX. Michiru rubbed her face what seemed like the 100th time in the past hour. As the hours passed by, her fear of losing Naruto grew. It's time for you to head home. I'll make sure you guys can escape. A lone tear made its way down her cheek. Keikuso, she cursed silently as she finally gave in and sagged down on the ground. Why do you always have to do this? Look where it ended. She gave a quivering sigh and laid down on the ground, looking up to the sky. Unknown that Niji was watching her. Niji looked at her with an intense gaze, but soon let it drop to the ground as he himself found his emotions getting the better of him. Not through tears, but in hatred. I'm going to kill every single one of them. Kakashi, who was sitting up in one of the trees, looked down at the both of them with a sigh. He didn't know Michiru very well, but he had spoken to her a couple of times, and apparently she was skilled in the medical department. He remembered when he had asked her about Naruto. Flashback 10 months ago. Kakashi was strolling around the village, with his Ika Ika Paradise Volume 3 in his hands. He had just gotten off the border defense, after Pain had shown his strength in one of the Reaver's latest attacks. They had pulled back for a while, giving them enough time to recuperate. He arrived at the training area where he saw one of the hunters leaning against one of the wooden poles. The gray-haired Jounin casually walked over and gave her a wave. She looked up at him and gave him a small smile. Hi. Can I help you? So, what's a hunter doing out here? He asked as he flipped a page. The girl tilted her head slightly. Do I know you? I'm sorry. The name's Kakashi Hatake. I was Naruto's old sensei. She raised one of her eyebrows. Alright, well, my name's Michiru Sunday. Still haven't answered my question though. I was training but I decided to take a break. I got a bit lost in thoughts, she told him. Kakashi leaned against one of the other poles. What were you thinking about? She shrugged. All sorts of things. The Reavers. Murarka, Naruto. Kakashi glanced down at her. What was he like before all this started? I've only met him once before all this. He was very nice and was always joking and pranking Rome. She gave a chuckle. I didn't even know it was him until a while ago. Was it because he went by the name of Ghost? Kakashi asked. He had long since closed his book and was now intently listening. She nodded absently. That, and I just forgot, I guess. So many stuff going on lately. Well, he must have changed a lot since then. Yeah. But he's not all that cold towards us, just distant. With a sigh she stood up. I think he just had trouble connecting after he went lone wolf for a long time. He went lone wolf. Kakashi was a bit surprised. Was that around 6 years or so ago? Well, during that period he was already going solo for a pretty long time. When we met up a couple of months ago to prepare for the invasion, he had been going lone wolf for 4 years. That's around the time frame of the Irosa massacre then. Kakashi concluded. I'm still not convinced he did it. Michiru stubbornly said. He told it himself. The gray-haired Jounin said. Remembering the words Naruto had said at the arena. Michiru narrowed her eyes slightly. I don't care what you might say. Unless he tells it himself. I'm not believing it. Kakashi shrugged before disappearing in a puff of smoke. End flashback. Was Naruto dead? Most likely. From the intel they received, he went up against the leader of the Reavers. Alone. From what Kakashi heard, no one ever survived an encounter against that man. Except for Rome. And he only managed to do it once. After his second attempt he ended up in a coma and was likely to pass away. Friendlies incoming, an IWA shinobi shouted. Kakashi turned, looked towards the entrance of the camp, which was guarded by 4 squads of Umbu. Michiru looked up as well. Her eyes were red and her face was streaked with tears. XXX. Naruto saw the camp getting close and for the first time he was happy to see something related to konaha. Itachi softly sighed. I need a drink. Naruto looked at him with an exhausted but surprised look. TT, that's new. Don't say anything to Kisame or you can walk from here. The Uchiha said. Not giving Naruto any more satisfaction. Hinata. Kiba shouted as he ran from the camp. Closely followed by a group of people. Are you okay? He asked as he pulled her in a hug. Causing her to almost lose her grip on Naruto. I'm fine, Kiba. Just very tired. She said with her eyelids drooping ever so slightly. Niji stood next to her. A smile formed on his face, he had to restrain himself from showing any other outward signs. Glad to see you back and well, Hinata-sama. Naruto in the meantime had his eye closed. He was completely drained and wanted nothing more than embrace the darkness. Itachi however shook him slightly. Hold on, we'll get you to Mayu. He looked at the newcomers who were now focusing their attention on them. Naruto needs immediate medical assistance. Before anyone could respond, Michiru pushed herself to the front of the small crowd and saw Naruto being supported by Itachi and Hinata. Standing there with his gaze looking at the ground. Not wasting any more time, she sprinted over and pulled him into a tight hug. I thought you were dead, she half sobbed. Naruto let himself fall to his knees and returned the hug. Hey. It's me you're talking about. I am not Hawk, why you know? You know. I heard that. Hawk responded. Standing next to them smiling as well. He too was afraid he had lost another friend. A very close friend at that. Michiru slowly released him and noticed he still was trying to hide his face in his hood. She softly pulled his mostly ruined hood back and turned his head to look at her. What she saw made her gasp loudly. What did he do to you? She softly touched his cheek and stroked it. Kick my ass. Was all the blonde managed to say. Who did? Kiba asked as he walked over to the blonde. Leaving Hinata in Niji's hands. Damn, who did this? Alright, we need to get you looked at. Come on, let's go. Michiru helped him back up and started carrying him into the camp. Hawk supporting the blonde as well. He fought against the Lord of the Reavers. Kakashi asked as he joined in the crowd. Itachi only nodded. Keeping his gaze upon Michiru and Naruto as they entered the camp and decided to do the same. A loud murmur of whispers could be heard coming from the shinobi that were present. Voicing their surprise. Kiba's eyes slightly widened. Naruto fought the guy and ended up like that? Shit. Sasuke, who had been watching from a small distance, heard what Kakashi had asked. He remembered the encounter he had with the man. With a single strike he had been put out of fight. Granted. The attack was very painful, it did not inflict a life-threatening wound. Sasuke gritted his teeth. He had trained a lot the past year to get where he was. But there were still people who made him feel like he was useless. He decided to follow Itachi's example and entered the camp again, thinking on what to do next. XXX. You really went too far this time. Naruto. Mayu said as she tore off his ruined shirt and bandages. Giving her a better view of the wound. Naruto mumbled something incoherently. Michiru looked at the wound and winced. That's deep. While she said that, she couldn't help but glance at the rest of his upper body. Small and large scars littered his chest and arms. Hawk, who had been watching from the side, whistled softly. What the hell has been into these last years? Mayu shook her head. I have no idea. Something we'll ask him later. The gash is too big to heal with our medical ninjutsu, she told Michiru, who nodded in return. So we'll first try to at least reduce the size before we stitch it up. It won't be pretty, but it's the best we can do. Before Michiru could respond, Deidara came walking in. HN. Patch him up to the point he can travel. Mayo looked at him questioningly. What are you talking about? Command suspects Reavers will be marching to this camp soon. We have to leave within 3 hours. HN. I don't think Naruto is up for traveling by then. Mayo muttered. It's not up for discussion. He either goes with us by then, or he'll be left behind. With that, Deidara left the tent again. What about Rome? Michiru asked, glancing to the entrance from the time to time. I will carry him personally if I need to, Hawk answered seriously. Mayo gave a sad smile before focusing back on Naruto. 2 hours later. Michiru wiped the sweat of her forehead. I guess that's all we can do for him, we still have an hour left before we have to wake him up. Mayo nodded. I'm going to check on Rome. That pink-haired girl is watching over him. Sakura, Michiru corrected her, while she gave her mother a glance. Mayo only nodded and left the tent, leaving Hawk and Michiru behind. How are you holding up, Michiru? Hawk asked as he walked up to her. Noting her exhaustion, she looked to the ground. I couldn't do anything against him. Hawk let out a bitter laugh. It's Kenpeki. That guy is most likely the strongest individual in the world. But I just sat there, watching everyone get killed, she whispered and gave a wave to Naruto. Naruto had to save me. Don't sell yourself short. I've seen you fight and you're good. Just not good enough to fight against Kenpeki. I'll never be dash dot. Would you shut you up already, they heard a voice say. Hawk and Michiru turned to the origin of the voice and saw Naruto sitting up in his bed. Hawk let out a humorless laugh. Even Kenpeki can't keep you down for long. Before Naruto could say anything else, he was pushed down by Michiru. You shouldn't be up yet. Go back to sleep. Naruto struggled, despite having almost no strength. How do you want me to sleep when you are whining around? It's really depressing. Stop struggling. Kami. You're stubborn, Michiru said as she refrained from rolling her eyes. Hawk stepped forward and gave him a stern look. Rest for another hour. After that we have to move out. What about the survivors of Kumo? The blonde asked as he stopped struggling and lay back down. We heard that the ones who managed to survive retreated into the Raikage's office. For whatever good that may bring, Michiru answered. So the wiry out. Quiet. Go back to sleep you. Hawk warned him again. Naruto weakly shrugged and slowly drifted off again. But before he could fully fall asleep again, his eyes snapped back open. Our Rome. Hawk winced while Michiru stared to the ground. Naruto slowly pushed himself off the bed again, groaning in pain at the effort. Don't tell me. Hawk shook his head. He's still alive but in a coma. We can wake him up from it with the help from a Manaka. But it could very well kill him. The wounds already did too much, the female hunter whispered. He's not going to make it to nightfall, even in his current state. Naruto heard enough and stood up, groaning, and quickly grabbed Hawk by the shoulder to keep him from collapsing. Get back in bed, idiot. Hawk hissed and tried to push him back on his bed. Naruto feverishly shook his head. I have to talk to our Om. We'd have to wake him from his coma. And that will probably kill him. He is mentally and physically done. Naruto hesitated but still walked towards the exit of the tent. I need to know what happened with his first fight against Kenpeki. He left the tent, ignoring the cold wind hitting his bare scarred chest. A couple of shinobi looked up when he left the tent but he ignored them. He pointed to the other medic tent. That the one? Michiru nodded. That's the one. Naruto entered the tent and limped to the prone body lying on the field bed. To say that Rome looked like hell was an understatement. Bruises and cuts littered his body. The most notable wound was the one on his chest, where the blade had exited. Naruto crouched down next to him and grasped Rome's hand. What is his weakness? You fought him before. He heard footsteps and looked up when he saw Michiru, Hawk and Ino enter. Naruto tiredly stood back up. Why Amanaka? See, can you enter his mind and see his history with Kanpeki, the leader of the Reavers, without risking his life? She shook her head. No. I would interfere too much and cause too much damage. If you do, he will die. The Uzumaki asked with concern in his eyes. Without a doubt, I'm sorry Naruto, Ino sadly said. Naruto looked from Rome to Michiru. I can't do this to her. He's like a father to her. I can't make the decision to end his life just for some extra information. Michiru looked at him with pleading eyes, begging him not to do it. He sighed and started stretching, taking extra precaution not to rip open the stitches. Fuck it. Plan B. Give me 2 food pills. Now. Hawk's eyes darted from the left to the right, trying to grasp the meaning behind his request. What are you doing? The blonde gave a painful smirk. As something stupid. Michiru handed him 2 food pills, giving him a worried gaze. Without saying anything, he swallowed the food pills and picked Rome from the bed. Ino's eyes widened slightly. You're going to do that trick of yours, aren't you? Naruto merely nodded and exited the tent. You must have completely lost it. Your body can't handle the strain, Hawk half shouted, trying to stop Naruto. If I don't, Rome W will die. Hawk didn't know what to say and watched as Naruto prepared his flash step. Be careful, don't want to patch you up again, Michiru said with a worried gaze. SC? Even Michiru isn't trying to stop me, Naruto said as he carefully laid Rome over his shoulder and closed his eyes. He breathed out and took a step forward. And disappeared. During his flash step, he gritted his teeth in pain. It felt like his body was being pummeled by Kanpeki all over again. When he arrived at his destination, he immediately collapsed in exhaustion. What's going on? Someone asked him as he arrived at the gate. Naruto didn't even bother looking up. Medic, was all he managed to utter before he slipped into unconsciousness. 4 days later, Kanpeki looked at the remains of Kyumigakuer. The battle was fierce and he had lost many men in conquering the shinobi village. Now he could march on the capital without interference of Kyumo's army. Once he had that out of the way and he had the land of lightning in his grasp, he would invade the Sika country, which had a small shinobi village, Takigakuer. From there he had 2 options. Attack the land of fire or move down to the land of wind. Sir, what are your orders? Lasting asked as he kneeled down next to his lord. We'll regroup and patch up the wounded here for the next few weeks. Also, send word to the 3rd Fleet to move to Sika country and start preparations there. Do it discreetly. I want no more interference from either the Akatsuki or the hunters. Understood, sir. Lasting started to walk away but stopped when Kanpeki spoke again. Did you find Ghost's body? Lasting shook his head. Not yet. But we will. No way he survived. Kanpeki merely nodded and balled his hands into a fist. Killing Ghost wasn't very difficult. Admittedly, the man was powerful, but nothing he couldn't handle. His son's killer was gone. But that didn't sate his bloodlust. 3 weeks later. Naruto finished his push-ups and stood back up. He had recently snuck out of the hospital and started on an easy workout. He had a black cover slit over his right eye. Or where it used to be anyways. It had come as a shock for him when he first heard it wasn't there anymore. He still had to get used to it, and he still often slipped and fell to the ground only to jump back to his feet, mentally slapping himself for his stupidity. Rome was recuperating well, thanks to Tsunade and her healing abilities. Even though he was still in a coma, Ino Imanika had told them she would be able to wake him up from his coma without risking his life soon. So now there was only one thing left to do for the blonde hunter. Keep training until he was strong enough to face Kanpeki. But at the same time he knew he needed to go to the source of this madness to find out why Kanpeki was this insanely strong. When he came to the shocking revelation that perhaps Kanpeki had somehow managed to get into contact with the Shinigami, it explained a lot, to say the least. But how did someone meet the Shinigami? His father and the 3rd Hokage were the only ones who knew. But they had paid it with their lives to meet the dreaded Shinigami. Naruto. Are you serious? A female voice said behind him. Naruto turned around as he straightened his white shirt. Hey Hinata. Why are you already out of the hospital? Hinata asked as she looked him over. Naruto shrugged. I got better things to do than lie in a bed all day long. He cracked his neck and was about to leave when he was stopped. You're not going anywhere, Hinata said as she grabbed his arm. Naruto grimaced and almost fell to the ground and hissed in pain. Or so it seemed. She instantly let go and supported him. Are you okay? Naruto suddenly grinned and twisted himself out of her arms. Didn't know it was that easy. Talk to you later, Hina-chan. And with that he disappeared. Hinata's left eye twitched in annoyance. Unbelievable. That man. Naruto walked down the street, faltering in his step every so often. The loss of his eye gave him some problems with his depth perception. But he knew that it was only a matter of time. He turned a corner and walked past a couple of market stalls, stopping at one to inspect its merchandise. Well, look at you. Don't you clean up nice, a voice said behind him. Naruto glanced over his shoulder, holding one of the short blades the merchant was selling. Worried I wouldn't be able to sate your needs. The woman in question stood next to him, also starting to inspect the weaponry. Oh. I already found myself a new playdate, she shrugged before tossing the blade back on the table. You were a decent lay, but in the end, I can't have people figuring out I've been fucking one of Konoha's biggest traders now. Can we? Naruto shook his head with a smirk. Gotta keep up the good rep. Anko nudged her head to the left. Heads up. Naruto was barely able to look up before a fist crashed into his face and sent him sprawling. The fuck? You traitor! A teen boy screamed at him, sending his fist flying at the blonde again. Naruto was barely able to raise his arms before the boy's fist slammed into his guard. Konohamaru! What the hell are you doing? Stop this now! Konohamaru ignored him and tried to hit the hunter again. But this time the blonde was prepared and grabbed the incoming arm and threw him in against a wall. What do you think you're doing? Naruto snarled at him, pinning him against the concrete. Traitor! Abandoning Konoha for your own selfish reasons. The boy spat at his former idol. Whilst this was happening, Anko stood there snickering. A small crowd gathering around to see what was going on. Me? A traitor? Konoha abandoned me. They tried to take away the one thing that mattered most to me. Konohamaru pushed him away and took an aggressive stance, though not appearing to attack again. You didn't even stay and fight? You ran away instead of fighting against it? Naruto burst out in laughter. Trying to fight a council that licks the heels of him. He pointed to the crowd, seemingly at no one in particular, before they gave way to Sasuke, who was watching the entire ordeal from a small distance. By now a lot of his old friends had arrived as well, taking in the scene with slight apprehension. Naruto waved his arms to them as well. My so-called friends. And I use this word with absolute loathing. They did nothing to help me. They all just huddled around your precious Uchiha, making sure that whatever came out of his putrid mouth was sacred. Naruto. Sakura started slowly, taking a step forward. We were young and immature. We couldn't know that this would happen. By now Konohamaru had managed to free himself from the blonde's grasp and pushed him away. You were the boss. You gave up so easily. I expected much more from you, he spat on the ground at the feet of Naruto. Go back to the hole you crept out of. We don't need you. Your leader doesn't think so. Might want to check on her before you throw out the group that's assured your survival so far. The blonde snapped back. It was then that Konohamaru's teammates arrived. Mogi, who once wore a unique hairstyle, had now opted for a more stylish and yet simplistic ponytail that befitted a chinin of her age. Naruto gave her and Udon a spare glance. Well, at least Mogi changed. The girl had grown into a somewhat attractive young woman that held an aura not unlike Sakura. Sweet, but dangerous when messed with. Udon, on the other hand, had barely changed. He had grown taller in the years that had passed by, but it hadn't changed his physique. He had dark hair that was combed backwards. That just didn't quite seem to fit the teenager. Konohamaru-kun. Let's go. All right? He's not worth it? Mogi spoke as she placed her hand on the Sarutobi's chest, trying to steer him into another direction. Naruto's eye twitched at the comment but let it slide and instead looked to the crowd. What are you all looking at? Don't you have something better to do? The villagers softly talked to one another before they slowly but surely resumed their daily business. Naruto turned around and continued his trek to the Hokage Tower. His mood soured. Glancing to his right he noticed his old teammates from Team 7 walking beside him. What? You want more drama? Sakura shook her head and. Just wondering where you're going. Naruto grunted and pointed to the tower. Gotta talk with your Hokage. He gave one last glance to a grinning Anko and shook his head amusingly. His anger ebbing away. And why is that? This time it was his old rival who spoke up. Just be patient and you'll find out soon enough. Naruto looked ahead and noticed Kisame standing there with his usual ridiculous grin. Well. If it isn't the copycat, he let out a bark of laughter. Oh. I'm sorry. I mistook you for one of these konaha dogs. Asshole. Naruto muttered. A small smile adorned his face. Aren't you supposed to be recruiting rogue shinobi? Kisame nodded before glancing at the blonde's companions. I did. Recruited a bunch of B and a couple of A ranked, he nudged to Sakura and Sasuke. I see you finally kissed and made up. Naruto shoved Kisame aside and started walking towards the Hokage Tower again. You wish. I'm just an incredibly nice guy that everyone wants to befriend. Sasuke snorted. Softly muttering. Dope. Team. Naruto grunted back before looking ahead. Noticing that they were almost at the entrance. You sticking around? Fish. Could use your help actually. Kisame looked at Naruto before chuckling. Sure. Why not? Meanwhile. Sakura was watching the entire conversation with a smile before quickly following her old teammates. X. 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 Hawk watched from the corner of the office as Jiraiya and Tsunade were softly conversing along with Shikaku and his son. With the fall of Kyomagakure everything was uncertain. Despite inflicting heavy casualties on their enemy, the Reaver onslaught didn't seem to slow down and were slowly but surely marching their way through Kaminari no Kuni. With the fall of its hidden village, there was little they could do to stop it. The daimyo and his army tried to do what Kumo's shinobi couldn't, but the difference in both mass and power was enormous. They didn't stand a chance. The choke point is now Shimo no Kuni. But we can't forget that even if we bunker down there, the Reavers still have a fleet they can use to outmaneuver us. Shikaku pointed out. Shikamaru walked around the table which had a map placed upon it. What it seems like they're doing is, pointing at Tsuka no Kuni, Nami no Kuni and finally at Kaminari no Kuno, is dividing our attention. They are invading us from different angles which forces us to split our shinobi forces. It looks like they are aware of our alliance with the other countries and are adjusting to it. Before anyone else could speak up there was a knock on the door and Sakura opened it slightly. Tsunade-sama? Do you ha? She was cut off abruptly when Naruto and Kisame pushed her aside and entered the room. Tsunade narrowed her eyes at Kisame before they softened again when she saw Naruto. Manners. Anyone? They both looked at each other and shrugged. I need a Hyuga for a mission into enemy territory, Naruto stated, his eyes darting across the room. Tsunade raised an eyebrow in surprise. As did the others in the room, including Sakura and Sasuke. And just like that I just hand over one of my shinobi to someone who barely looks at me. Naruto shuffled with his feet impatiently. Yeah. Sounds about right. Unless you give me some actual details of this mission you can forget about it. Brat. Fine. Naruto muttered, taking a seat on top of the table of the Hokage, playing with some of the instruments. I may have found a way to get the dragons on our side. Jiraiya looked taken aback. And how would you manage to do that? Naruto glanced at his old teacher. During the battle of Kyomagakure while you were still marching, one of the beasts managed to separate me from the main battle. He told me to come to Tuva Tower in 14 days. But that was 3 weeks ago. Tsunade, who was leaning with her head on her folded hands, spoke up. And you don't think this is a trap? Naruto seemed to contemplate it for a moment before shaking his head. His blonde hair ruffled about. I don't think so. He could have attacked me back then. He had me trapped and could have severely injured me. Yet he didn't. I truly think that they might want to switch sides. That's a lot of what-ifs. Naruto. Shikamaru began slowly before being interrupted by the Hokage. I'll give you a Hyuga. But only if you take Sakura and Sasuke with you. How about no? Naruto responded and pointed over his shoulder to the Akatsuki agent. I'm planning on taking Kisame and Itaka with me. We work well together. Tuva Tower lies in enemy territory. If you want a Hyuga on this mission, we'll be doing this my way. Tsunade said with finality. Her arms crossed in front of her chest as she leaned back in her chair. Naruto could already imagine the smug faces of Sakura and Sasuke. You're killing me. Fine. We'll do it your way. Tsunade turned to Shikamaru. Fetch Hinata and Sasuke. Will you? Shikamaru muttered something under his breath which sounded an awful lot like troublesome but left all the same. Well. If I'm not going along, I'll just find myself other people to kill. He winked at the group and gave a last glance towards the blonde before leaving the room. Naruto smirked and gave him a nod. Moving across the room to sit down next to Jiraiya and Shikaku. Sakura followed Naruto's example and sat down across from him, fidgeting with her hands as if she was trying to find the right words to say. Sasuke. Kiba and Ino softly conversed amongst each other, glancing towards their old friend every now and then. How's your eyesight? Tsunade stood up from the table and took the last seat. Jiraiya, Shikaku and Naruto on the couch, with Tsunade and her apprentice on the two chairs. It's fine, look. I'm really not in the mood for small talk. Hokage, just leave me be. Naruto softly spoke, adjusting the cover of his eye slightly. He reached for the one of the glasses but once again his sight failed him and instead brushed his fingers past it. Let me do it. Sakura started and she reached for the glass. I lost an eye. I'm not fucking blind. Save your pity for someone who wants it. He grabbed the glass and then reached for the jug of water, filling his glass, spilling a portion of it on the table. Shikaku, who was sitting next to him, glanced towards Jiraiya, sharing a look but saying nothing otherwise. Jiraiya spoke up instead, leaning forward slightly. Brat. How about you relax a bit? I need to relax. I've been trying to just that. But instead I keep getting harassed. With people trying to punch my lights out and whatnot. Who did what now? Tsunade asked, her eyes narrowing. Konohamaru. Or at least he tried, that brat, he muttered before pointing his fingers at the Hokage. Keep your shinobi in check. Next time I'll break every bone in his body. You deserved it? Kiba shouted across the room as he butted into the conversation. Let me rephrase it better, next time I'll break every bone in both Konohamaru and Kiba's body. Naruto coldly stated, taking on a more relaxed posture as he leaned back into the couch. Kiba pushed past the group who was standing with, baring his teeth in anger. It's time I put you in your place. Naruto waved him off with his hand, barely paying any attention. Inyazuka. Go and ask your sister how well that worked last time. Ino grabbed the active Inyazuka and pulled him back. Kiba, you need to cool it. I swear I'm going to smack you. Kiba reluctantly backed down. His angry gaze remained on the hunter as Ino steered him away to the other end of the corner. Good doggy. Naruto took another sip from his drink and turned to Jiraiya. How's the new book coming along? The Sunin grinned. Oh. Kakashi will love this one. And here I thought you finally made some quality books. This is some high quality storytelling. Its art is what it really is. The blonde sighed and shook his in disappointment. I don't know who's worse, you or Deidara. Jiraiya reached for his pouch and pulled out a book and handed it to his godson. Speaking of books, I wanted to give this to you a while back, but I didn't get the chance. Naruto grabbed the book and looked at the cover. The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi. Jiraiya winked at him and slapped his shoulder. I'm sure you'll find some time to read it. Naruto nodded his thanks and slid it in his pouch. I'll give it a read. Arigato. Moments later Shikamaru walked in. along with a fully geared Hinata. You called for me? Hokage-sama, her eyes darting across the room until they settled on Naruto, who gave her a nod. Naruto briefly brought her up to speed of the mission and then nudged to Sasuke and Sakura. They'll be joining us as well. How long will the mission be? The Hyuga asked. Looking at Sasuke and Sakura. Several weeks. So pack accordingly. Naruto spoke as he stood up from the couch, drinking the last bit of water from his glass before setting it on the table. Hinata nodded and patted her backpack, which she was holding in her hands. I'm equipped for a long-term assignment. By now Ino, Kiba and Shikamaru had left the room, wishing them success on their mission. Or at least Ino and Shikamaru did. Kiba merely grunted. Naruto turned to his new temporary teammates. One last thing. If you guys are going to go all. He waved with his hands in emphasis as he tried to find the right words. Konaha-ish on me. We're going straight back. Understand? The room broke out in laughter, with Shikaku and Sasuke smiling at the antic. Alright, let's meet at the gate in 30 minutes. Naruto turned heel and exited the room without uttering another word. X. 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 Sasuke was the last to arrive and he gave everyone the once-over. Sakura and Hinata were fully equipped as Jonin should for an assignment of this duration. Naruto, however, was dressed in his usual attire that hunters were known for. Is everyone good to go? Naruto asked, also taking in everyone's appearance. Hi. Though I've been going over the region we'll be crossing and there is heavy river activity. Sakura pointed out whilst slightly adjusting her vest. I know. That's why we'll be using flash step to reach the border outpost and go on foot from there. Civilian-wise. If we use chakra to enhance our speed, they will find out us for sure. That will take us weeks to get there. Dope. Naruto nodded. I'm aware of that. But once we're finished, we can use flash step for our return journey. No need to stay secretive then. Sasuke reluctantly agreed whilst he signed out at the check-in station. Fine, let's get going. Naruto motioned for them to gather around him. Alright. Grab my arm tightly. They did as instructed and firmly grabbed him by either his arm or shoulder. The hunter exhaled before taking a single step forward. And the four of them were gone in an instant. They came to a slightly messy halt. Except for the blonde, the team either fell to the ground or had trouble to remain upright. That was unpleasant. Hinata said, hoping for the dizziness to stop. Ugh, you tell me, you could have warned us, Naruto. Sakura scolded, wheezing slightly. Naruto shrugged before grabbing Hinata's arm, pulling her up. After a couple of times you don't even feel it anymore. He turned to the outpost and saw Itachi standing there. Let's go. He walked over to Itachi, gazing over his shoulder to see Sasuke giving his brother a hateful look. He turned back to Itachi and patted him on the shoulder, letting his hand rest there for a moment. How's it going? Itachi returned the gesture, a slight smile adorning his face. It's been going well. They have been testing our border's defenses every now and then, but nothing serious. Where are you headed? Momentarily looking at the rest of the group before finally settling his eyes on Sasuke. Those dragons, I think I might be able to persuade them to join our cause. Or at least I hope so. His lone eye took in Itachi's tiring features. You look like crap. You should head back to the village and get a couple of days off. Itachi shook his head. I'll be fine, he stepped aside. Good luck. Naruto-kun. Take care of my brother. Tisk. Why would you even care? Sasuke hissed. Itachi tilted his head. Because you're my little brother, of course. Your family. Sasuke exploded at that and had to be restrained by Sakura. Don't talk about family like that. You killed Tusen and Kasan. You killed our entire clan. Itachi created some distance, whilst Sakura sent a few of the onlookers away. You don't know the story behind it? And someday soon I'll tell you all about it. Just not now. With a sigh, Itachi turned around and slowly started walking back into the compound of the outpost. There isn't a story to tell, he shouted before he roughly shrugged Sakura off. Moving on. From here on out we have to walk without the use of chakra. Obviously, and with that he took the lead. Hinata following him with a still seething Sasuke behind them. With Sakura besides the Uchiha trying to calm him down. X. 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 They moved slowly and silently. They were a mile or so away from one of the occupied villages but dared not to take any risks by speeding past it. This is going to take forever. Hinata softly spoke. As she ducked underneath one of the low-hanging branches. We can't risk them catching us. The hunter suppressed a shudder as his thoughts wandered towards Kanpeki. Ever since his fight he wasn't able to stop thinking about the reaver. It had shaken him to his core. Sasuke reached for his pouch and pulled out a small canteen containing water. Dope. I need to know something. Naruto, who had taken the lead, turned his head abruptly. Cut off from his thoughts. What do you want to know? Have you really been hunted by my brother and that other guy? The black-haired Uchiha asked. Barely able to keep the venom out of his voice as the image of his brother floats through his mind. Naruto grinned cheekily. Ah, you must mean at what happened in Oto no Kuno, when he saw Sasuke nod. He continued. That entire thing was a ruse. Back then I was already working with your brother and Kisame. We had caught wind that Konaha was closing in on us and couldn't get out unseen without a proper distraction. Itaka was the one to do so. Hinata joined in the conversation. Who killed the Umbu who were guarding the perimeter of the village? Naruto looked at her with a questioning gaze. If you're hoping I wasn't involved, then I must disappoint you. Kisame may have done the killing. But I was just as much involved. And what about with the Irosa massacre? Sasuke bluntly asked. Redirecting the entire conversation. Naruto stiffened but relaxed after a moment and resumed his former pace. The Irosa incident was something that was unfortunate but necessary. Unfortunate. Necessary. Murdering innocent men, women and children unfortunate. You have changed and not for the better. Naruto. Hinata hissed. Surprised by Naruto's lack of emotion in this matter. Naruto turned his sole eye on her. Cold and calculated. You have no idea of the reasoning behind it? It was unavoidable. Sasuke snorted. You killed innocent people. You don't have any ground to stand on here. Dope. Now it was Naruto who snorted. Are you hearing yourself? Team. He looked towards the Uchiha. You destroyed a portion of a village in your pathetic attempt to kill your brother. You killed numerous innocents there. What is your excuse? Sasuke grabbed Naruto's shoulder and twisted him around. Facing him. At least when I did it. I tried to kill a mass murderer. My actions are justified. Hinata and Sakura butted it in. Hushing them both. When it involves innocence. It's never justified, the Hyuga softly but sternly said. Ending the argument. The entire group remained silent for the remainder of the afternoon. When evening fell and they were out of reach from any of the villages, they decided to set up camp at a small clearing that was mostly obscured by trees and bushes. After they finished, they slowly unpacked. I'll scout around for a bit, see if there's no one lurking. The hunter briefly spoke before disappearing into the densely packed bushes. He sure has changed. Hinata softly spoke. Looking to Naruto, who was sitting on a log, taking a sip from his canteen. Hard to figure he was once the orange loudmouth team. Sasuke grunted, mimicking Hinata's gaze. You think we'll be able to get him back to his former self? Sakura asked, putting her backpack on her ground and started rummage through it. Sasuke didn't respond and Hinata in turn bit her lower lip in concern. Naruto gave a final glance before being satisfied. He turned around and began retracing his step back to the camp. He wasn't happy with his old teammates tagging along. Couldn't they just leave him be? He noticed the small fire that was lit at the camp and realized that Sasuke hadn't put a proper perimeter up. He sighed. Can't they do anything right? He arrived at the camp and walked over to the Uchiha. For a so-called konaha elite, you sure aren't showing it. With a sigh he formed a couple of hand signs before muttering something. Seemingly nothing had changed. But Naruto knew his genjutsu was set in place. The little amount of chakra he used would most likely not attract any attention. What are you talking about? Sakura asked as she joined in. I'm talking about the lack of proper security measures set up to make sure we won't be killed in our sleep. He pointed at Sasuke. Next time make sure you have this set up the moment we arrive. Before Sasuke could give an appropriate response, Hinata slid between the two, placing her hand on the blonde's chest and trying to defuse the situation. Let's eat. I've made some food. I'm sure you still love miso ramen. Right, the Hyuga asked as she turned the hunter towards the food. Miso ramen? It's been a while since I've eaten some actual good food. Naruto moved to the fire and noticed a cup of insta-ramen, already boiling and waiting. Sakura shook her head and smiled. Some things never change. She softly spoke to Sasuke as she joined the other two for some food, unzipping her jonin vest so she could finally relax a bit. Naruto sat down and pulled his hood back and his face mask down. He reached for the cup but instead merely grazed it with his thumb. Depth perception still isn't fully adjusted yet. The others noticed but refrained from saying anything and instead grabbed their own rations and wolfed it down. You know, I've always been wondering where your group came from, Hinata asked as she glanced at the blonde, taking a bite from her own food. Wouldn't you like to know? He responded coldly as he brought the cup to his lips, emptying the last of its contents into his mouth. She nodded as she took in his features. The black eye cover brought a certain weariness with him she hadn't seen before. I'm curious. I'm sure it's an interesting story. Naruto-kun. Naruto looked at her before letting out a sigh. Well, the hunters were created by Rome and Mayu back when Mararka had fallen. They had formed a resistance group and were trying to find as much survivors as possible. Not only to keep them safe but to fight as guerrillas as well. Sasuke and Sakura had finished their meals as well and were now listening in on the story. But Reavers are, methodical to say the least. There weren't a lot of survivors to begin with. Regardless, the resistance kept fighting until they were located. They put up a final stand. But it mattered very little. How did Mayu and the others escape? Sakura asked as she scooted a bit closer to Sasuke, who didn't seem to mind. The attack happened when they were out looking for supplies. They survived purely due to luck. Everyone else got slaughtered, no one was spared. Kami, if they hadn't then the Reavers would have arrived here with no opposition at all. Hinata spoke, shuddering at the ruthlessness of their opponents. So, how did they find you? Sasuke asked, pressing the story onwards. I was at Nami no Kuni for a while. I lived with Tajuna and Tsunami and I felt at place. But it didn't last. Scouts from the Reavers were sightseeing and attacked the village. I managed to kill them. I didn't know what was going on. Until your brother showed up. The blonde pointed at Sasuke. He explained to me who they were and what was going on. I remember searching for you in Nami. They desperately tried to throw us off your trail. Sakura responded, letting her thoughts wander off before Naruto continued. Itaka told me to move on from the village. So I reluctantly did. Eventually though, they found me and almost caught me. Hawk showed up and saved me before taking me under his wing and letting me join the cool club. Naruto smirked and let his mind wander to years past. And how did you get your ability to transform your arm? Sasuke asked bluntly, his eyes plastered on his gauntlet. Naruto stretched, letting out a yawn. Story time's over. He stood up and walked to the edge of the camp, leaning against a tree, leaving the others. Hinata let her gaze follow him before turning her attention back to Sasuke and Sakura. I guess he is getting used to us. Bit by bit. I always wondered how he came in contact with my brother. Sasuke softly said as he stood up and walked towards the blonde. Naruto noticed and gave him a sideward glance. So that's how you met Itaka. Naruto gave him a single nod. His gaze locked on the darkness of the forest ahead. You do realize I'm going to kill him the moment this war is over. Sasuke mimicked the hunter and just looked straight ahead. You'll try. And I'll succeed. It's time he pays for killing my family. He's paid enough. If only you knew the real story behind the incident. Sasuke turned to his former teammate and grabbed him by his shoulder, forcefully turning the blonde towards him. There wasn't a reason for him to kill my mother or my father. To kill all those innocent people. Like how you killed those civilians during your fight with Itaka when you were searching for me. You can stop pretending to be innocent. Sasuke. You aren't innocent either. You slaughtered an entire village. And for what? Some pitiful excuse you won't even tell us. He narrowed his eyes, glancing at his old friend. For the first time he truly took in the blonde in front of him. His shoulders broad and his back straight. He gave off an aura of confidence. At least that's how it looked from his perspective. His face was set in grim determination and yet he looked very tired. Not physically but mentally. I never said I was. I'll pay for the things I've done, but until then. Keep your nose out of my business. Naruto pushed him aside and walked off. Naruto walked to his pack which was lying next to his sleeping bag. Stuffing the canteen back into it before looking up and into the eyes of Hinata. Naruto-kun. Can we talk? The blonde shook his head with an annoyed look on his face. I've talked more than enough with you guys, I want to be left alone. You have to talk to us if we want this mission to succeed. She crouched next to him glancing at his eye cover. He sighed and closed his backpack. Running a hand through his blonde hair. Just leave me be, okay? She nodded. Acquiescing to his request. I'll take the first watch. Sakura offered to take the second. I'll take the third then. Naruto answered before grabbing the 3-point leather belt that went from his upper left shoulder to the right side of his waist where it extended to his left side. Firmly keeping his outfit in place. He unclasped the belt allowing him to remove the black robe as well as letting the red sash fall to the ground. Hinata silently picked up the sash and handed it to him. I'll leave you be. She stood up again. Walking towards her own sleeping bag. Naruto draped his outfit over his pack and sat down. Still wearing his shirt as well as his pants that were of the same color as his robes. He looked at the red sash in his hand. The trademark of the hunters. Arigato. He looked up at her retreating back. You can't expect me to just smile and play along as if nothing happened. Hinata. All I ask is to give us a chance. She turned around. Smiling at him. And what if I don't want that? He let the red sash slide between his fingers. Playing with it offhandedly. Do you really want to leave us behind? After everything that we've been through. She slowly walked back. Naruto stared ahead towards the dark forest. Dodging her gaze. What if I do? A small tinge of fear gripped at her heart. Hearing his words. I don't want to give up on you. Naruto-kun. But I miss the old you. The goofy kid that inspired me to become a better kunoichi. Naruto sighed and leaned back against his pack. His eyes slowly closing. He's been gone for years, he isn't coming back. His eyes snapped open once more and looked at the attractive Hyuga standing in front of him. You all made sure of that. We were kids. We didn't know any better, you can't put that on us. She wavered under his gaze and looked away. I wish what happened didn't happen. I thought the world off you. Naruto-kun. I guess disappointment is a common thing then. Naruto leaned forward and started removing his boots. I wish I could say that I'm sorry I ruined the image you had of me. But I honestly don't feel that way. She took a step towards him. Her eyes darting all over his figure in an attempt to take a hold of the situation. There must be a way to get you back. The blonde seemed to mull it over before scoffing. Your council either wants me in chains or have me executed. Why would I even want to be part of a rotten village? The pale eyes girl looked at the ground. Trying to find the right words. You have to understand, the terrible things you've done. Naruto looked at her. Emotion gone from his face. We are shinobi. Terrible things are what they expect of us. He slid in his sleeping bag and turned away from her. Ending the conversation. X. 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 The next day they resumed their trek. They weren't making a lot of progress. The upside was that they didn't use any chakra, and because of that, if a fight were to occur, they could engage the enemy without fatigue. For the most part Naruto kept to himself, letting his temporary teammates chat amongst themselves. They did try to include him from time to time, but he kept his answers short and to the point. Hinata slowed her pace and walked next to the blonde. You know, I heard that you told the Hokage that you had died. When you were still going as Orotochi Ghost. Naruto remembered and grinned at her. Oh yeah. That was after the Hokage's pathetic attempt to take Itachi and me down. So. Why did you say that? She asked him, her face marred with conflicting emotions. Well, I wanted to hurt her for one. But it also helped strengthen my identity as Ghost. Naruto remembered that day well. He couldn't fault Konoha for their reaction. But it didn't mean he wasn't angry. What about that story of you attacking Orochimaru's base? That one was true. Well. Mostly, Naruto said. Using a konaha to cut through a particular thick set of bushes. I teamed up with Itachi to take the snake out. We almost succeeded as well, but I got overwhelmed and we had to pull back. Why did you go after Orochimaru in the first place? Sakura asked. Looking at the blonde with interest. Naruto coldly stared at her. Orochimaru had something that belonged to the Akatsuki. I could use the training back then. How long ago was this? Sasuke added in. The mentioning of his brother had piqued his interest. A couple of years ago. Can't be too sure when. It doesn't matter. The bastard got away. He'll get his due. Ghost said with finality. As they continued their journey throughout the day, Ghost made sure to keep his interaction with the rest to a minimum by scouting ahead of the group with Hinata. As they looked around the environment, Hinata suddenly grabbed him by the arm and stopped him. I see a group of Reavers coming our way. She quickly whispered. Her Byakugan activated. Naruto snapped his gaze into the direction and could sense the faint traces of demonic chakra. Let's head back to the others. They burst through the trees and instantly put the rest of his team on guard. Listen up. There's a Reaver patrol ahead. Do we let them past us? Sakura asked. Her eyes glancing over the blonde's shoulder. If we do. And they find our tracks, we're fucked. Plain and simple. If we take them out. Word will eventually reach their base camp, but hopefully by then we'll be long gone. Naruto softly spoke. So. Let's take them out. Sasuke said. A smirk adorning his face. He was itching for a fight. Letting Naruto know that he wasn't the only one who had grown stronger. Okay. Drop our packs here and let's set up an ambush point. Naruto ordered and took the lead. He knew they hadn't much time and swiftly hid behind a tree. Holding a konaha in a reverse grip. He glanced to his left and saw Sasuke and Sakura also ready. Turning to his right he saw Hinata, who gave him a nod to let him know she was set as well. Naruto heard the chatter of the group approaching and reckoned that there were 5 of them. From what Rome had told them, he knew that patrol parties usually held 4 regulars and 1 holder. The leader of the group. Naruto held up his hand for his team to see and counted down with his fingers. 3, 2, 1, now. Naruto jumped down and instantly spotted the holder. He immediately dashed forward, swinging with his konaha, aiming at his opponent's head. Hunter! How pitiful, the man roared as he blocked the attack and countered with a swipe of his claw. Naruto held up his gauntlet and prevented the attack from gauging his remaining eye out and retaliated with a kick, causing the Reaver to stumble back. Katon, Gokakyo no Jutsu! Naruto roared as his fireball crashed into the Reaver. Naruto charged forward but stumbled as he lost his balance and smacked to the ground. God damn it! The holder wasted no time and regained his composure and sent a wave of red chakra his way. The hunter held out his hand. Chakra push, a blast of pure chakra slammed into the red wave and cancelled each other out. The blonde straightened his back and looked around. He saw that his teammates had almost finished off their opponents. At least they're not completely useless. He turned his focus on the holder once more and narrowed his eyes. The sheer difference in holders and regulars was immense. If the Reavers didn't possess the capability to meld with demons, he doubted they would have gotten far in their crusade. Come on. What are you waiting for? The holder looked around as well and knew that he stood little chance to survive. He lowered his stance and stood passively at a distance. Naruto mimicked his movements, aware that Hinata had just finished off her opponent. Come to surrender? We tend to copy your playbook when it comes to prisoners. Do you really think you stand a chance against our might? Like all the nations before. You'll try. But you will fail. Naruto snorted. You guys sure keep repeating the same thing over and over again. So far. You've taken Iwa and Kumo. But you've lost a lot of men in the process. Are you sure your conquest will be able to sustain these losses? Sasuke and Sakura landed next to him and held a defensive posture. It's over for you. You have no idea how big our numbers are. You haven't scratched the surface yet. Naruto scoffed and took another step forward. Inching closer. You're bluffing. If the army was as big as you say it is, you'd have invaded us long ago. The Reaver tilted his head before abruptly letting out a stream of red chakra before disappearing using Flash Step. Stay here. Naruto followed his foe using the same technique and followed the chakra trail. One of the few downsides of Flash Step. It didn't take long to catch up. He unsheathed his katana and plunged it into the retreating man's back, causing them both to tumble to ground, with patches of snow here and there spread about the area. Arg! Naruto stood up and grabbed him by his head, giving it a sharp twist, ending the man's life. His eyes darting around. He could feel demonic chakra around them, and he knew that they had a very small window of opportunity. He used Flash Step again and appeared in front of his allies who in the meantime had grabbed their gear. Grab hold now. We only have a couple of seconds. They instantly latched onto his arm, and they disappeared. Naruto clenched his teeth as he poured more chakra into his Flash Step. Well aware how taxing the ability was, they came to an abrupt halt, causing the whole group to crash into the ground. T-Team. Sakura stammered as she clutched her stomach, trying to keep her contents where they were. Sasuke slowly stood back up, as did Hinata. Where are we? Sasuke asked before looking to Naruto, who was still on his knees, panting heavily. Are you okay, Naruto-kun? Hinata asked as she crouched beside him. The blonde in return waved her off. His eye clenched shut, trying to get his breathing under control. We need to move, now. He stood back on his feet and stumbled slightly but otherwise remained upright. Are you sure? Sakura asked concernedly as she saw him move about. I'm very sure. Harano. If we don't leave now, we're screwed. He took off at a stumbling but steady pace. Naruto knew that Reavers primarily searched for chakra output. If they didn't use any, he hoped that they would have a chance at remaining hidden. He had noticed earlier that the temperature was dropping sharply. Not surprising. Where in Yuki no Kuni now looking down at his feet he saw that the ground was covered with snow. Luckily, they had prepared for this, and were wearing cloaks to keep themselves warm. As they trudged on, the afternoon slowly settled into the early hours of the evening. And with that, an even sharper drop of the temperature. They had long stopped running and had resorted to walking. The snow had reached up to their waist now, and Naruto had insisted to refrain from using any chakra to help ease their travels. If I had known it would be this cold, I would have stayed home. Sakura stuttered, her teeth chattering due to the cold. Thick snowflakes covered her hair. It had started snowing hours ago and it didn't seem to let up, only growing worse as the cold wind kept crashing into their fatigued bodies. Naruto looked at her and had to agree with her. Even though he had been here before, it certainly hadn't helped prepare him for the cold. The snowfall isn't letting up. It'll only get worse. As he said that, the wind howled, causing the downpour of snow to hit his face. Let's set up camp. We've traveled far enough, Sasuke told the blonde, who nodded in agreement. The hunter looked around for a small clearing and pointed ahead. There's a good spot. We'll dig in there. The snow will be a good natural cover, he half shouted as the noise of the storm tried to drown out his voice. He pushed on ahead and reached their destination. Heavy snow-covered pike trees made for an even better cover. Let me guess. No chakra? Sasuke asked sarcastically. You got that right. Team. Naruto tried to smirk but instead turned into a grimace as the cold continued unabated. They let their packs drop to the ground and reached for a compact shovel and unfolded it, revealing it to be a small yet handy item. They quickly got to work and started creating a small clearing in the waist-high snow. Big enough for them to set up a small camp. Naruto glanced over to Hinata, who was shivering as she threw the last bit of snow over the wall of snow. All right. I'll scout around a bit. See if anyone is following our trail, Naruto announced as he wrapped the cloak tighter around him. As much as I am going to regret saying this, I recommend setting up 2 small tents and bunk together in pairs. This country is known for its deadly temperatures at night. Are you sure it's wise to go out there alone? The weather is only getting worse, Hinata asked him. Let her eyes darting up and down his body. Noting his weariness. Let me tag along. He shook his head. I'll be fine. You make sure the camp is finished by the time I get back. The blonde turned around and retraced their steps, which he was still able to see. Another downside to this type of environment. Thinking back, he realized that their escape was one of luck. By all accounts they should have been found. Perhaps this weather impeded with the Reaver's ability to hunt. We got away. That's what's most important. He had to agree that his temporary teammates were capable. Something he was very doubtful of at first. Perhaps they aren't as useless as I thought, he muttered, his face mask hiding the movement of his lips. Minutes ticked by and slowly passed the 1-hour mark. Looking around, but he could see little as the heavy snowfall limited his field of view immensely. Perhaps the only positive thing to come out of this weather is that if I can't find my camp, there's no chance they'll be able to. With little hope of spotting anything in this weather, Naruto turned around but could barely see ahead. Following his previous footsteps, he slowly dragged himself back to the camp. After 10 minutes of walking, he noticed his trail back was becoming weaker and weaker. Nice going there. He continued in the general direction he guessed the camp would be. Looking around, he didn't find any landmarks that could help him navigate but urged his body to move on. Trying to ignore the freezing temperature that had dropped to far below the freezing point, he ducked underneath a snow-packed branch, only to fall to his feet as his sight once again failed him. Kuso. He pushed himself off the ground, his hands protesting against the cold. Mayo told him that it was a matter of time before his depth perception adjusted accordingly. Not that it helped him much now. By now the cold seeped through his cloak and outfit, making it feel as if he was walking naked through the forest. Heavy snowfall covered his dark hood and shoulders as he slowly pushed himself onwards. Fatigue, which had already been an issue before, was certainly starting to take its toll on him. He took a sharp right, hoping that this would lead him to his camp. Even though it seemed like he didn't get any closer, he was certain it was close by. How he wished the Uchiha's incompetence would rear its neck once more. A couple of minutes later he suddenly stumbled into the camp. He had passed the genjutsu, noticed 2 triangle-shaped tents that were set up across from each other. Between them 3 figures were huddled together. I take it this isn't your type of weather? Naruto asked as he suppressed a shiver. The 3 turned around and could see the relief etched on their face. Took you long enough. Dope. Sasuke jabbed as he stood up. Naruto shrugged, which was followed up by another shiver. Well, if the Reavers find us now, I don't even care anymore. Hinata tried to chuckle but failed miserably before walking over. See, come on. Let's get into the tent. Those T2 are paired up. So you're stuck with me. Hinata took him by his hand and led him to the tent. She pushed the flap aside and slowly headed inside, closely followed by the blonde. See you in the morning. Sakura gave them a wave before she led Sasuke to theirs. Once inside, there was barely any room and all he could do was sit upright. In front of him were 2 sleeping mats shoved together. On top of it, Hinata had unzipped 2 sleeping bags, effectively making them into 2 large blankets. Aren't yous straightforward? Naruto stuttered whilst unclasping his cloak and dumping it in the corner before turning around and zipping the entrance of their tent close. Hinata turned to him, a sincere smile on her face. We need to keep warm, Naruto-kun. You said so yourself. She too removed her cloak and started removing her long-sleeved shirt. Naruto turned around and started removing his own clothes, his teeth chattering even worse as the cold bit into his bare skin. Their small abode could do only so much against the unforgiving weather of Yuki no Kuni. He heard a small gasp and he twirled around, noticing Hinata staring at his naked upper body. She herself was covered by a fishnet shirt and shorts that did little to hide her incredible figure. She came closer. Her eyes still plastered on his chest. Where did you get all these scars? Naruto's mind wandered to all the fights he'd been in before shaking his head. We've known about the Reavers for a long time. She let her eyes follow his scars. Some small and insignificant. Others were grotesque and large. Finally, her eyes settled on the eye cover. That one W was Kanpeka's doing. Naruto softly spoke, his hand reaching for his face. Remembering the humiliation that had happened, she looked up at him. Her eyebrows furrowed in worry. You have to take it easy from time to time. I'll rest once the Reavers are dealt with. He slowly let himself fall onto the sleeping mats, sighing in relief as he crawled underneath the sleeping bag. She shook her head and crawled in next to him. You are one stubborn man, we are really messed things up. Haven't we? Naruto knew what she was implying. Yeah, you did. His eye grew heavier and slowly his eyelid dipped down. The warmth underneath the sleeping bag certainly helped increase his weariness. I want to make amends. For what we've done. Looking back at him. Inching closer. Their arms brushing against each other. Naruto mumbled something. No. She turned to lay on her side. Towards him. I want to make things right. You've got to give us a chance. The blonde momentarily opened his lone eye. The mauled one hidden behind his eye cover. Go to sleep, he said before turning his back to her. She could only stare sadly at his back. The carefree Naruto from years ago seemed even further away. Okay guys, bye.